blockchains, they're actually dumb things.
The hive mind effect of people, Oracle networks and infrastructure providers, is, we should not be a gatekeeper.
People don't even know that they're using crypto.
We're onboarding the onboarders.
Hey guys, what's up? It's another episode of the Next Billion podcast. We're here today talking to the builders, which are onboarding the next 1 billion users into crypto. And today we have some awesome people on board. We got the Switchboard guys. And we're going to start off talking to Chris from Switchboard. So Chris, thank you so much for coming on board and welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you guys for having us.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, George, I feel like I've known you online for multiple years. And it's finally great to finally meet in person.
It kind of feels that way, doesn't it? Like maybe crypto ages you super fast, but it feels like Solana's been around for like 10 years at the moment, something like that.
It really does, yeah. And it's also great. I love the mission, of how do we onboard the next billion?
That's what it's about, man. And, for those out there, like that is kind of the Solana motto. Like that's why they're doing the phone thing and doing some other stuff, because if we want crypto to grow, we can't just be talking to ourselves for the next 5 years, right? Like we need to actually try and reach out. Like what are the things which are going to onboard the new people, into the crypto ecosystem. So, you guys are doing a great job at that.
Well, thank you. But, we like to say that we're onboarding the onboarders.
Hey.
Right? We're building tooling to help everybody else onboard those next billion people.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Hey, that's a good segue. Like maybe we'll start with a little bit about yourself and your background, Chris, and then we can get into what Switchboard is and what's going on. So how did you get into crypto? How are you sitting here today in Lisbon at the Breakpoint conference?
So I got into crypto, call it 2013, 2014, and really from the idea that, Bitcoin would kind of be this global payment mechanism, which, now in retrospect, people kind of laugh off.
Yep.
But at the time, it was taken very seriously. And it was this idea that, okay, we could have BTC payments effectively for everything.
Yep.
It would replace SWIFT as sort of this global settlement layer, and you wouldn't have to worry about cash anymore. With that thesis in mind, I worked for Circle. And, again, it was a different era of crypto, but, it was this idea that you could have crypto as a general payment mechanism for everything, which, taking things back to where it is now, really actually was one of the big reasons why we were inspired to build on Sol was, this very scalable, composable, fast L1, where in theory, a lot of these different mechanisms and ideas around sort of those core infrastructure and core payments being acceptable everywhere could be done.
Do you think we're coming full circle? Because man, I remember back in the day, it was all about, let's get Bitcoin to pay for a coffee. Or I remember Dish was one of the first, was it IPTV thing or something like that? You could pay Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And then Xbox Live had a thing, everyone was freaking out. It was like the biggest thing ever. And now we have Solana with the Solana Pay and stuff like that. Do you think it's like coming full circle where, okay, now we're getting back to payments and getting back to the currency kind of stuff?
Yeah, so, there's this Web 2 idea that a lot of ideas were just too soon, and they weren't at the right place at the right time. And I feel like the Web 2 equivalent would be like Webband versus Instacart. Sure, there's some nuances and differences in the business, but in general, Webband didn't work in 1999. Instacart did work in 2012, whenever they started.
Yeah.
I think you see a lot of that coming back in crypto as well. If you go on the old Bitcoin Talk forums, you can go through all these crazy ideas, or at the time that seemed crazy, that now actually people have built and have created, their own separate industries around it.
Yeah.
Just even the idea of smart contracts. Like, I'm thinking back to, George, you've been in the industry for a while. The idea that we would even have smart contracts the way they are now is kind of crazy if you look back and you were speaking to people that were solely in that era and thinking with that. So I think we have, and I think we'll continue. And I think those crazy ideas from the early crypto days, there is some truth and some merit to many of them.
Yeah, maybe it's just the time that they're all going to sort of emerge now. Like I remember my vintage in crypto is probably 2011 when I first got started mining Bitcoin and stuff like that. But back then it was about a currency that you could use around the world, private money, divorced from the state and so on. And really, you're trying to create a financial system with that, but you don't have all of the other stuff that goes with it, right? So people back then were thinking, maybe one day we'll be able to lend our Bitcoin, or we'll be able to do, whatever it is, pay for stuff in Bitcoin, or swap it without an actual exchange that's a database, and we have to do custody. And now we have this thing called smart contracts that it's actually trying to get there and trying to actually realize the future of we should have the financial system itself on chain rather than just the currency.
Right.
And I think that's the difference from the Bitcoin days. It's like that was all about a currency, and now we're thinking actually quite bigger, where it's like it's not just a currency, it's a financial system, right?
Right. And the infrastructure also has just changed so much. So many other things are possible on pretty much every single aspect of scalability.
Yeah.
Even from the Bitcoin days of now, you have Lightning and you have other things, to L1s like Solana, to even now, you have rollups on Solana, like Eclipse is building stuff, and other things that are going to enable more scalability. across the entire ecosystem.
Totally. Yeah. And well, I guess on that point of like building these applications for the financial system, that's what Switchboard does, right? Like maybe give a bit of an intro. What is Switchboard? Why is it important? What are you guys doing?
Yeah, so Switchboard is a permissionless, decentralized, customizable Oracle network. And one way to think about it is we want to build that fundamental building block that you can take any public or private API, any data source that you want, on-chain or off-chain, and easily create your own data feed for your application. And this is very much, sort of our mentality that, permissionless finance needs permissionless data feeds and permissionless sources. And our entire thinking is, we should not be a gatekeeper. In general, Oracle networks and infrastructure providers should not make, editorial decisions on what to provide. We should give access to people to the largest and broadest amount of data or tooling or accessible points possible, and leave it to the end user to customize that for their need.
This is why I love Switchboard because, and I've been saying this as well publicly online, like I think the great thing is that, as you said, you're not a gatekeeper. Like whatever apps, I remember when you guys first launched, it was kind of, there was a lot of lenders emerging, and now there was like 6 lenders on Solana or something like that. And a lot of them needed Oracle feeds for a lot of different tokens that maybe were a little bit crazy. Like for example, coins that like MSOL or XStep or something like that, something that had inbuilt yield into it. So the price of it wasn't as simple as like, hey, let's just look up the price on some exchange. It was a little bit more complex than that. And once you had those sorts of coins, you could do more complex strategies and that sort of thing. But you needed the price feed for those types of coins, right? So I think, yeah, like that would be an example of Switchboard was just there helping us like get all of that, get started on day one and getting out of the way and not being a gatekeeper. I think that was super cool.
Yeah, again, we don't think any particular network should have total control or total decision making over any data feed or really any price feed. We think it should be the protocols themselves that should be in charge of that and configure it to exactly their needs. That's not to say if, George, you need help with something, we're happy to give our input, but we just don't think that that's the place of a neutral infrastructure provider in this permissionless economy to make those decisions on behalf of protocols. And, again, like it's one of those things where the way we view tooling and the way I think, the open source mentality and sort of the composable mentality of really the Sol ecosystem is evolving. I think it really should be that, user developer first focus where give people the tools they need to succeed and then let them take it from there.
Totally. And I think like people think of blockchains as complex things, but they're actually dumb things. And what I mean by that, by dumb, it means, well, a blockchain doesn't know the weather today in Lisbon, right? And if I want to build an app that utilizes that, I need some sort of source of information. I need some reliable source of information that A, can't be easily corrupted or manipulated, and B, is always there on chain. It's not like out of date. Like I want to know that the temperature in a city now. I don't really care about 3 weeks ago because that's what my app needs. So really, I guess for those not familiar with oracles, like that's what you guys are all about, right? It's being able to provide price feeds for literally anything, not just financial kind of stuff like the price of a coin. It could be anything. Like, it really depends what the app is. Would that be reasonable?
Yeah, that's totally true. It's really data, right? And it's really being able to plug into any sort of Web 2, or by the way, Web 3 as well. We actually spent a lot of time building out sort of on-chain infra. I'm working with a lot of partners on that also, so that you can create your own aggregated index, whether it's a price feed, whether it's, like you said, the weather in Lisbon, whether it's some GameFi stat that you want for your game. The things that I think we have to be humble enough as builders and as people in the community to understand is that we're not going to have an answer for everything. And there are going to be use cases that are going to surprise people and think that this never would have been possible. And this never would have been something that people would have originally expected to take off.
Yeah.
That may.
It comes out of nowhere, like these kind of things, right?
Right.
And the next big thing could be, who even knows, like, it was, the app with the walking and people.
Yeah, Step In.
Yeah. So it's like, it could be a lot of things that just come from left field that just blow up and become really big.
Totally. I mean, NFTs, right? Like,
yeah, NFTs.
We saw Dapper and CryptoKitties back in the day. Even CryptoPunks, and they were first sort of being done.
Who would think people want to buy a monkey with a hat on a blockchain?
Right.
I didn't.
Right. And now these are multi-billion-dollar markets.
Yeah.
And NFT liquidity in many cases, right, for certain collections, is larger than a lot of liquidity in a lot of crypto tokens.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to just see the evolution of how this has grown and all these new cases that are being built on chain. And we're super excited for sort of that future of what's next, right?
Well, what is next? I guess, what are you guys looking at the moment? You mentioned GameFi, NFTs, these sorts of things. Like, certainly, I think Switchboard's pedigree started in the DeFi world and, you know, a lot of price feeds. But sort of, what are you seeing? Like, what do you think the future for you guys is? Is it in providing information for GameFi projects? Is it NFTs? Or where are you guys looking as the future of what you want to do?
Yeah, so we really want to be able to support a lot of hyper specialized use cases.
Right.
And that's one thing that we're seeing is, you know, more and more of the crypto world is becoming more specialized.
Yeah.
And making sure that you can provide the tooling for that is really important. So for example, on the GameFi side, you know, we built the first VRF on Sol that allows gaming companies and other people, gambling companies, people who need verifiable sources of randomness, and you can prove this to your users on chain.
That's cool. That's like back in the day with Satoshi Dice. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do remember.
Yeah, and like you had to, so Satoshi Dice was a dice roll game, right?
Yep.
And you had to trust that the server, you know, was providing you the right seed, and they could provide, you know, proofs of it, but it was a little bit more difficult, right? But it was difficult to build apps that could be able to prove randomness. And that was a really important thing, certainly in like gaming industry and stuff, where you literally need something random, right?
Right, yeah. So there's that, but there's also just other things that, you know, I don't think people have fully explored on chain yet.
Yeah.
You know, I think, for example, on the social media side, you know, you have this new generation of dApps that are being built now of trying to recreate, you know, a decentralized Twitter or a decentralized Facebook. Ignore the scalability concerns for a second.
Yeah.
Just the concept. And, you know, they're going to need data for a variety of different things.
Right.
And we're really excited to partner with companies there and, you know, see what they're going to build. I don't know what, you know, sort of the next, you know, huge thing is going to be in crypto, but, you know, it definitely feels like the energy is very much more shifting to consumer focused type applications versus, say, the purely financial type.
I hope so, because I think that's where you know, people say, what are the metrics to measure growth in crypto? And some people look at TVL, some people look at individual users. And, you know, if you're targeting, say, institutions and that sort of thing, maybe you just care about TVL, right? Like $1 billion from one person, hey, it's still $1 billion. But if you had $1 from 1 billion people, like what's better? I would err on the side of more healthier for your app or whatever you're trying to build is 1 billion people with $1.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's where we're going is like we need more products that are like reaching to people. Hey, maybe it's social media, right? Or something like that. Maybe people don't even know that they're using crypto or a blockchain behind the scenes. But like if you're building the tools and the infrastructure for people to actually build that's awesome. So I guess we're here in Lisbon. We're at Breakpoint. You know, Switchboard team is out and about. Like we're swapping merch here and there. What is important for you guys here? Like, have you been meeting with some of the different teams here? Yeah, sort of. What's the plan?
Yeah, I mean, it's meeting with, you know, the awesome builders in the Sol community and in Lisbon in general, as well as just seeing, you know, what the new next generation developers have built and how we might be able to help them. You know, we're onboarding the onboarders, if you will.
Right.
We're building
I like that.
The pipeline for these other people to then help them build these hopefully billion user apps.
Right.
And, you know, our perspective is very much, how can we help?
Yeah.
What do you need? And how can we help you achieve that? And if, you know, that's getting highly specialized, you know, weather data on chain, for example, we're happy to help there. If it's, you know, more randomness on the GameFi side, we're happy to help there as well. If it's, you know, specialized price feeds or for structured products or whatever it might be, you know, we're also happy to help.
And how do we get started? Like, I think when I last checked Switchboard, you guys had like a marketplace thing or something like that, right? Like, let's say there's people out there, projects that want to get in touch with you guys or have an idea for data. Like, what do people do and what's the process that they go through to get started with this kind of stuff?
Yeah, so you can get started on our docs.switchboard.xyz. But otherwise, you know, feel free to reach out to us on Telegram, Discord, Twitter.
And just come to you with an idea or something and be like, hey man, I want plants on the blockchain. Like, I need data on how this bad boy's growing.
If you have a public API, you actually don't even need to talk to us. You can go configure that and build that on your own.
Nice.
That being said, you know, we're always happy to chat and explore ideas of how we might be able to help.
Yeah.
You know, again, our goal is to see everybody who comes to us succeed. We only win if you're winning. And I think that's really important to realize is that, you know, DeFi and sort of crypto in general is still a positive sum community. And it's something where I don't think it has to be, you know, sort of the zero-sum competition. You know, I think that there is a world where, you know, these use cases and the things that we're building can grow together. And we hope we can help everybody that we're working with.
Absolutely. Critical point of infrastructure for the entire ecosystem. Like, definitely, if people are out there, where can they find more about Switchboard? You mentioned the docs. I guess you guys are on Twitter, maybe blogs. Yourself, maybe on Twitter as well. Like, where should people go?
Yeah, so follow us at Twitter at SwitchboardXYZ. And we'll have a lot of updates to share on there. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us there or on Discord or Telegram. We try to be available.
Fantastic. I mean, one of the things which I always say to people is Switchboard's amazing. We've had good interactions with you guys, super quick turnarounds on things. Look, thanks so much for your time, Chris. And hey, we actually have another one of your team members with us as well, Mitch, right? Who's more on the technical side. So stick around. We're going to talk to Mitch in a moment and maybe get more stuck into sort of some of the mechanics of how you guys go about things. But thanks so much for being on the podcast today, Chris. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, George.
Awesome. And we're back. We've actually done a bit of a switcheroo here. This is like an Airbnb. By the way, this couch is scratched by cats. It's not that terrible. Like, I'm not like trying to kill someone or something.
I've met the cats. They're very cute.
They're great.
Very cute.
They're great.
When we were prepping for this, it just came and sat on my lap, and I felt like I was Dr. Evil just petting it.
You know what? Maybe we should include the cats next time.
Next time,
that's
actually.
Probably how we do it.
They should have told you they came with the Airbnb.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, they didn't. But
Yeah.
It'll be great.
Yeah.
We had a heads up. But
Yeah.
no, so as we said, we have Mitch with us as well from Switchboard. And Mitch is, I mean, you're more on the tech side, right? So
Yeah.
really sort of maybe give us a bit of an introduction about yourself and like how you got into things and
Definitely.
what brought you to crypto, what brought you to Switchboard, how are you sitting here in Lisbon today?
Yeah, totally. So I am CTO of the Switchboard. I got a master's in computer security from Michigan, like 6 years ago now at this point. I went to Google for about 5 years. First 2 years I was at Google Hardware working on home network security, and then the next two I was a tech lead on App Engine, focused on VPC network security. And it was kind of a really interesting team that I was running. It was this product that actually connected the networking stack of App Engine, which was made before Google Cloud was around, and then Andromeda, which was the Google Cloud networking stack. And the team was actually small, so we actually had to manage about every detail of it, and no DevOps person actually knew how to do it, so basically covering the whole team. But I actually had a friend when I moved to San Francisco that also moved out with me, who was working in crypto at the time. Actually met Chris, who was working at Circle at the time, and over the years we knew each other lightly. And then beginning of 2020, Chris, was actually deep into the Solana space and knew that this was up and coming. He said we should build some primitives, so reached out to me. He said, "Can you make an Oracle?" I built a prototype and closed a seed round in 3 weeks. So I was like, I guess I'll quit my job. So we'll do this. And
That was the good days, man.
Yeah, and then it just kind of got to this point from there. Really
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Right. So really sort of like a Web 2 journey that then transitions into Web 3.
I did a lot of the FANG companies for internships and then just went at Google.
Yeah, you saw the light.
Well, I was going to get a PhD before Chris pulled me out of that. But
nice.
Yeah.
Maybe eventually, right?
Yeah.
Something like that.
But I like, I've been focused on security. I was going to go get a security PhD. I taught the security course in Michigan for a year too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, on that front as well. So I guess on the technical side, we're talking a little bit about how developers can really like get started with Switchboard and what they have to do. And we're talking a little bit about price feeds, and it could be anything. It could be financial, it could be not.
Right.
Like what is necessary to spin up a price feed? Like, do I need to do anything beforehand? Do I need to, I don't know, be running a service somewhere that does something or run some sort of software? Like, what's the process?
Totally. There's a few options really. And when we say Switchboard, I wouldn't describe it as a network as much as it's a protocol.
Right.
We have this whole schema that is really easy to spin up what we call an Oracle realm or queue. Add your Oracle to it if you have the authority to approve new Oracles, and then add a data feed to that to be fulfilled in every interval that you want. It's a pull model too.
Right.
And the whole idea behind this is the internet itself is non-deterministic, while the blockchain is always deterministic. Or any input you have, the output. So the question becomes, how do you build consensus to make a non-deterministic answer you get from the internet deterministic on chain?
Right.
And right now, the most common solution is taking some weighted median by volume by reputation of nodes. That is, the most common answer, and that's what we utilize in V2 currently.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Like, what if I'm a bad guy, right? And what if the product is what's the temperature today in Lisbon?
Sure.
And then I come in and say it's 50 degrees when actually it's like 21 or something.
Well, so the idea is there's two trust layers. There is the trust in the Oracle layer that's actually reporting, and there's trust in the site or the other third-party extension that you're actually using to pull this data from.
Right.
So the idea is the more oracles you have, the more that any attacker would need to corrupt all the nodes to get a majority to modify
It's like
the
a
answer.
coordination game kind of thing. Pretty
Yeah.
like early Bitcoin mining, like you have to compromise.
It's a
whole bunch of
51%
people.
attack for the weight of reporting.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So
Totally.
I guess the more people providing data feeds, the better.
Yeah, so this is part of our protocol. When you make a data feed, it always costs more to request more oracles to perform a job, right? Because they all have to transact.
Yeah.
So it's a balance between cost and integrity.
Yeah.
The more nodes you have, the better, of course, though.
And you're saying cost as well. Like, does this mean like is it on-chain sol fees or something?
Yeah,
or?
so we would try to match it to on a scale of gas fees. So right now, at least for Sol, that's pretty consistent. 5,000 LAN ports. We do 2.5 times the transaction cost to make the uptime of the oracles worthy of the operator's time.
Right.
So that's all modifiable in the way that we're talking about spinning up data feeds. Anyone can spin up their own realm and set the reward price. So if you just want to do something private for your own data feed and run your own oracle, you could set that to 0 and not have to worry about it. And then your data feed will run forever. Because in our world of data feeds, all feeds have an attached escrow that can be topped off at a certain amount by the creator, and that will be used to pay out oracles over a certain period of time.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, so all right, so we're talking oracles and a whole bunch of other stuff. but-
Right.
So more data feeds, the better, and anyone can kind of spin up.
So the more data feed sources,
Right.
the better. The more oracles you have to respond to that data feed,
Right.
the better. And it's really about finding liquidity, at least for DeFi.
Yep.
Where the highest liquidity is, because that's going to be the hardest to manipulate on the source.
Well, that's the thing, right? So it's not just a number of data feeds. Like I could have a number of data feeds, but like I'm the only guy providing that. But
Yeah.
if there is a data feed which 10 million people are relying on or using, or
Right.
that 10 million people are using an app that creates that data,
Yeah.
that's probably a more trustworthy source of data
Yeah,
than like just me and my
there's
bedroom.
the hive mind effect of people
Right.
that have, like recognizing that this is probably safe because it's been reviewed by so many peers.
Yeah.
So yes, there is that aspect, but you also have to understand that when you're talking about Switchboard, each data feed actually has an owner that is allowed to change the sources.
Right.
So you have to understand if the authority is set to null, so no, it's been locked, or like understand who actually has access to update that because they have full power over the data you're ingesting.
Right.
Yeah.
And so many of the use cases of this right now, like what are you seeing developers using Switchboard data feeds for?
Yeah, so it's been focused on DeFi definitely. That was what we started with. But we see funky ones. Or someone's making a bunch of weed price feeds currently.
Okay.
I'm like, okay, that wasn't my total intention with making this product, but
Yeah.
hey, people are having fun, and that's always
happens.
great. That's always great. We are seeing a lot of pickup around the VRF now. People usually want that for gaming.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And that was a lot of work to make. I'm happy that's actually getting there. So we actually had to fork the Dalek library to make the Euclidean times scalar multiplication fit within Solana transactions.
Yeah, within the transaction size, right? 'Cause that's
so
been
like each multiplication, it was like I had to split up into like 64 instructions that I could pack into. We made this whole function to like just automatically pack all instructions into transactions as tight as possible.
Yep.
But I was talking to some people on the Sol team. They're actually building some of this Euclidean scalar multiplication into syscalls for Solana. So I'm hoping we can get that down to like 2 to 3 transactions to actually confirm.
That'd be
VRF
amazing.
responses. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess for those out there as well, like you can only put so much information on a blockchain transaction, right? Like,
Yes. I think you're limited to 1232 bytes because it's size of, well, it was UDP peg, and now Quick I think has some other denominations it uses.
Yeah, I thought they were extending it or increasing it at some stage.
You can only do it to a certain point.
Right.
But another great feature they're having is those account mappings, which, when you have a data feed, we have like 5 or 6 accounts. One's the escrow, one's some other metadata stuff for like when it can be updated. Essentially, we have the account types for the aggregator, what we call a lease to manage the payment methods for the aggregator and the escrow. We don't need to take up the limited, I think, it's some 20-something accounts you need to pass in a transaction with multiples of 3 for each of the accounts we need. So they have this new feature that is account mappings, so you could more tightly pack these, and it's really useful for what we have is something called a crank system.
Right.
Also, so when you actually have a data feed, it automatically updates every 5 seconds. How does that actually work? We actually do all scheduling for data feed updates on chain. So we have a gigantic priority queue that have a timestamp linked with an aggregator pub key. So we just have to guess what's at top when the transaction actually lands, because we can actually predict it by the time we're formulating our transaction. Because if in Solana, you need to know exactly which accounts you're going to be touching right at the start of your transaction. Yeah.
And that's one of the things, right, with the cranking as well, that like if there is a source of a data feed that maybe people know what the source is before it actually gets published on chain, and then the crank runs, like things can only update on chain once the crank runs, but people might be able to front run it kind of thing by sort of knowing the source in advance, right? So is there any sort of, I guess, things that people need to be aware of when running data feeds?
Well, people should always check and tolerate a certain latency. There's going to be no Oracle that can just stream as fast as the sources. So right now we're have a lower bound. So the way that the whole flow works is you have one transaction for the crank to call that new information should be pulled. That gets launched to a set of oracles. They take some time to fetch HTTP responses or whatever type of responses you want, which we have a timeout of 2 seconds, and then they have a response. So the lower bound is the confirmation time of 2 transactions plus 2 seconds.
Yep.
So that's the lower bound of this poll system that we made with Switchboard. There are other ways where you can just stream information directly from a WebSocket into some aggregator, which we are currently designing because we've had a few requests for it.
Yep.
But no matter what, you can have some confirmation latency, and someone could always try to beat the Oracle to reporting that. So you got to build some level of acceptance of latency somewhere into your protocol to safeguard.
Yeah, exactly. I think apps have got to be aware of that.
Yeah.
And pretty much, I mean, most apps probably have some sort of tolerance in whatever they're trying to do. It would make sense to do so.
Right.
Cool. So the evolution of Switchboard over time, right? Started with DeFi. You know, there's the NFTs is popping off. We see that here at the conference as well. But
Yes.
sort of what's the evolution look like on your side as well for like the different stuff that's
Sure. So we had a V1 that, we launched V2 last December officially. So that's been, we announced deprecation for V1 January, February of last year.
Yep.
We're moving up into V2. Essentially because it's much easier for anyone to go spin up their own data feed than it does exist on V1.
Yep.
On V1 you can, but it's it's a lot more infrastructure to set up yourself.
Yep.
On V2 we automatically match you with oracles if you want to make your own data feed, which is I think kind of the really cool aspect of V2. And on V3 we're actually working on a new type of consensus mechanism that we're thinking this could be actually 5 to 10x cheaper for downstream users to actually maintain the same update speed and integrity that we have currently.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, look, like V2's been out for a while, so it makes sense to sort of be improving things and getting that. Like, it's such a critical piece of infrastructure for not only all of DeFi, but just increasingly just a lot of places around the world.
Yeah.
Right? So I think what you guys are doing is super important. And yeah, so like I guess what's on the horizon for you guys is kind of moving towards V3, like you're here at the conference, I guess you're meeting many of the partners and that sort of thing. Is there any feedback that they're giving here and there or anything that you think is important that the world should know?
Well, I think an interesting thing we're going to work on is the new persona of like the Oracle operator, spreading that as much as possible. I think we could have Oracle operators be a much more permissionless manner. So it'd be much easier for anyone to go operate an Oracle, possibly earn some SOL for the transactions that they're actually resolving.
Yeah.
And to actually really scale that would be my future goal this year.
Amazing.
And I think that's going to turn into a real possibility with some of the stuff we're designing right now.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So there's teams out there. They should definitely take a look at where should they go actually? Like if there's a dev team out there that wants to get involved in Switchboard.
So the coolest thing that I think we have is we actually have a UI tool for people to build data feeds and automatically be matched.
Right, I've seen that.
It
looks like some sort of marketplace thing. It's like you mix and match whatever you want.
Yeah. So most commonly people go directly to the build tool because they want to do it themselves, which is great. I'm so happy people are just getting down into it.
Yep.
And we have a whole drag and drop UI for all these different fetch types we have. Some are, just REST API fetches, and some are just from on-chain exchanges that we've actually integrated into the Oracle. Because we've actually designed a whole, I want to make it a Turing-complete language. You can just code anything you want inside this data feed logic that could involve loops, involve mathematical operations, and all these different types of operations that people are requesting. So you can go in there and build a data feed yourself and just be up and running within 5 seconds after you press publish. About 5 minutes for the whole process.
That's amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today,
Of
Mitch.
course.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. As I say, I love Switchboard. Love what you guys are doing.
Thanks for the socks.
Yeah.
That's
Hey,
the best part.
these are the best socks ever.
Oh yeah,
right?
no, totally. My toes are just through the moon right here.
Yeah, exactly. I love it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. We'll be in touch. And anyone, again, if you want to get in touch with Switchboard, check them out on Twitter. You got, I think, blogs and stuff. And
Yes.
Like you're on Twitter as well, right?
Yeah, Dr. Blocks on Twitter, all spelled out. Not DR. I wish I got that, but it's Doctor. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
All the best.
Okay.
Cheers.
Sweet.
Thanks.
Thank you.